I'm Dan Philippon. I teach in the English department at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, for the first part of this year I've been a Carson Fellow at the Rachel Carson Center in Munich. Right now I'm working on a project about the sustainable food movement. The project is called Ideal Meals, and I'm interested in the ethics of the sustainable food movement and how those have emerged through nonfiction writing in particular. So I'm really interested in kind of three aspects of discourse that have shaped the sustainable food movement over time. The first is what I call the spiritual ecology of sustainable agriculture. And what I mean by that is that there's been a tension in the sustainable agriculture movement between a kind of spiritual or even slightly religious understanding of agriculture and a more scientific argument for why sustainable agriculture should move forward. So I'm interested in tracing that tension. I'm also interested in the discourse regarding the animal welfare component of the sustainable food movement. So as much as agriculture is a part of it, animal agriculture is another important part of it. And there have been a variety of different arguments for vegetarianism, for instance, why we should eat less meat or no meat. And some of those arguments have been tied to eating less meat because if you eat lower on the food chain, you eat more efficiently and we can feed more people. So it's an argument really about hunger and global justice. But there are other arguments that go more toward the ethics of eating animals. And so there's a tension between those, and that tension's been shaped and changing over time as animal biotechnology has come into being. And so I'm interested in tracing both the tension between those two arguments and its transition into maybe a kind of post-humanist ethics. And then the third discourse that I'm interested in the sustainable food movement is the one between the global and the local. And that's manifest in several different ways. The one that interests me the most is the development of a kind of global gastronomy, a recognition that the food systems, the global food systems that we participate in also are tied to global cuisines in the way that the pleasure of eating in these various cuisines has influenced the American understanding of food. But increasingly over the last 10 or 15 years we've seen a number of food memoirs being published and an increasing attention to local food and a recognition that finding pleasure in your food through traditional forms of gastronomy isn't enough, but that pleasure has to really be tied to an ethical component that can come from eating more locally and reducing your food miles. So I'm interested in exploring the tension between those two aspects, the global and the local, in the sustainable food movement. One of the reasons that the sustainable food movement interests me is because it strikes me that in addition to climate change, food is one of the transformative aspects of environmentalism. In fact, there's a pretty good argument to be made, I think, that environmentalism, as it has been traditionally understood over the last 40 years or so, has really been transitioning into what we could term the sustainability movement. So we can't see the environment as separate from questions of equity, for instance, that social equity, environmental health, and economic viability, all three of those things are connected. And so to think about the environment, you really need to think about sustainability. And the one place where sustainability hits home for so many people is through what they eat. So paying attention to the sustainable food movement is really a way to pay attention to the transformation of environmentalism into this more broad social movement called sustainability.